The cold fluorescent lights of the USS Titan's Vengeance cast harsh shadows along the metal corridors as Gunnery Sergeant Mara Razor Reyes adjusted her standard-issue armor. The low hum of fusion reactors permeated the battle carrier, a constant reminder of the immense power that propelled them through the disputed Lyri sector. It was the year 2473, and humanity's expansion into the stars had not gone unchallenged. "Sarge, you want to hear something funny?" Corporal Thomas Bite Novak's voice crackled through her comm as he fiddled with his datapad, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "I calculated our odds of surviving this patrol route based on previous Valathi encounter data." Razor raised an eyebrow. "And?" "We're more likely to get killed by a malfunctioning coffee dispenser." He chuckled, the sound echoing in her earpiece. "I'll take those odds," she replied, checking her MA-712 pulse rifle for the third time. 15 years as a Marine had taught her that preparation, not probability, kept you alive. Petty Officer Second Class Han Lee looked up from his medkit, his steady hands organizing stims and nanopatches. "Probabilities don't account for human ingenuity," he said quietly. "Or luck. Or firepower," added Technical Sergeant Cole Gears Morgan, hefting his massive M220 heavy plasma cannon with the ease of someone lifting a grocery bag. The ex-miner's muscles bulged beneath his armor, a testament to years spent in the high-gravity mines of Europa before joining the Corps. Razor nodded to her squad, a tight-knit unit that had survived 3 campaigns together. "Standard sweep protocol. Bite, you've got point on sensors. Lee, center position. Gears, watch our 6. They moved with practiced efficiency, boots echoing on metal grating as they patrolled the outer ring of the carrier's habitation sector. The Titan's Vengeance was one of humanity's flagship battle carriers, nearly 2 kilometers of weaponry, laboratories, and living quarters orbiting the contested mining colony of Lyri 4. "All clear on thermal and motion," Bite reported, his eyes flicking across his scanner's readout. "Just another boring—" The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Razor's combat instincts flared. "Defensive positions," she barked, dropping to one knee and activating her weapon's targeting system. The emergency lights kicked in seconds later, bathing the corridor in an eerie red glow. "What the hell was that?" Gears growled, his cannon humming as it powered up. The ship-wide announcement system crackled. "Attention all personnel. We are experiencing a level 3 power fluctuation. Engineering teams are responding. Maintain standard alert status." Bite frowned at his scanner. "That's weird. I'm getting ghost signatures." "Wait." His eyes widened. "Sarge, these are—" The air in front of them shimmered. Razor had just enough time to shout contact before the first Valathi decloaked, its chitinous armor gleaming dully in the emergency lighting. 7 feet tall, with 4 arms ending in retractable blade-like appendages, the alien was a nightmare of evolutionary efficiency. Its compound eyes glittered with cold intelligence as it lunged forward with impossible speed. The corridor erupted in chaos. Razor's rifle spat superheated plasma bolts, the recoil familiar against her shoulder. Gears' heavy cannon roared to life, filling the air with the smell of ozone and scorched metal. Bite fired his sidearm while frantically trying to alert ship security, and Lee drew his own weapon while backing away to maintain medical distance. "Valathi kill squad," Razor shouted into her comm. "Sector 7G, need immediate backup." Only static answered. More aliens appeared, their cloaking technology failing as they engaged. Razor counted 5, then 7, then 12 of the creatures. An entire elite strike team had somehow infiltrated the Titan's Vengeance. "They've jammed comms," Bite yelled, ducking a swipe from a Valathi blade that would have taken his head clean off. "Ship security doesn't know we're under attack." Razor's mind raced. The Valathi were renowned for their stealth attacks, but boarding a human battle carrier was unprecedented. This wasn't a random raid, it was a targeted strike. "Fall back to junction point," she ordered, providing covering fire as her squad retreated down the corridor. A plasma bolt from her rifle caught one Valathi in what passed for its throat, dropping it to the deck in a spray of yellowish fluid. They made it 10 meters before the bulkhead behind them exploded. The blast threw Razor against the opposite wall, her armor absorbing most of the impact, but leaving her dazed. Through ringing ears, she heard Gear's cannon firing in controlled bursts and Bite's shouts, becoming increasingly desperate. She struggled to her feet, vision blurry, to see Lee dragging a wounded Bite toward the emergency access hatch. Gears stood like a mountain between them and the advancing Valathi, his massive frame silhouetted against the flames now consuming the corridor. "Go," he roared over his shoulder. "I'll hold them." "Negative, Marine!" Razor staggered forward, raising her rifle. "We go together." A Valathi blade sliced through the air, catching Gears in the side where his armor joined. He grunted but didn't fall, instead grabbing the alien's arm and using its own momentum to hurl it into two others. "That's an order, Sarge!" Gears shouted, blood now visible on his armor. "Get that data core Bite found. It's what they're after." For the first time, Razor noticed the small cylinder clutched in Bite's hand, a data core pulled from one of the labs they'd passed. Whatever it contained, the Valathi wanted it badly enough to risk an attack on a human battle carrier. Lee had the access hatch open. "Razor, now or never!" Another explosion rocked the corridor. The last thing Razor saw before being pulled into the maintenance shaft was Gears, surrounded by Valathi warriors, his cannon blazing even as their blades found gaps in his armor. The hatch sealed behind them, and darkness swallowed her scream. The maintenance crawl space was barely tall enough for Razor to crouch in, its narrow confines illuminated only by the emergency strip lighting along the floor. The smell of coolant and machine oil filled her nostrils as she tried to catch her breath, pain lancing through her side where a piece of shrapnel had penetrated her armor. "Status," she managed through gritted teeth. Lai was already working on Bite, whose leg bent at an unnatural angle. "Compound fracture, concussion, but he'll live," the medic reported, his voice steady despite the situation. "You've got a puncture wound, possibly cracked ribs. I need to remove that metal." "Later," Razor said, wincing as she shifted position to peer through a small vent into the corridor they'd escaped from. Through it, she could see only flames and the occasional shadow of a moving Valathi. Of Gears, there was no sign. "They'll think we're dead," Bite mumbled, his face pale from pain and shock. "Standard Valathi protocol. No survivors. Blow the section and move on." As if confirming his words, the ship's announcement system came to life again. "Attention all personnel. Security breach in Sector 7G. Section has been isolated and will be vented to space in 5 minutes. All personnel evacuate immediately." "Ship command doesn't know we're here," Lee realized, his eyes widening. "They're going to vent this whole section." Razor's mind raced. The maintenance crawl space was technically part of Sector 7G, but it had its own emergency seals. If they could get past the next junction before the venting sequence completed. "Can you move?" she asked Bite. He nodded weakly. "Just don't expect a dance anytime soon." "Lee, patch him up enough to crawl. We've got 4 minutes to reach junction B12. As Lee worked, Razor checked her rifle's charge, 73%. Not ideal, but enough to make a difference if they encountered more Valathi. Her thoughts turned to Gears, and a cold knot formed in her stomach. Another friend lost to these kitness bastards. It wasn't the first time. Flashes of memory invaded her consciousness. The Valathi raid on New Harmony Colony 15 years ago. She'd been a civilian then, just 19, watching her parents and younger brother cut down as the aliens swept through the settlement. The Marines had arrived too late to save most of the colonists, but just in time to save her. She'd enlisted the next day. "He bought us time," Lee said quietly, noticing her expression. "Made it count." Razor nodded, pushing the memories away. "What's in the core, Bite?" The tech specialist clutched the small cylinder protectively, despite his injuries. "Don't know exactly. Found it when we passed Lab 42. Door was open. Researchers dead. Grabbed it because it was in a high-security containment unit. Whatever it is, the Valathi want it badly." "Ship's AI might know," Lee suggested. "If we can reach a terminal." Razor checked her chrono. 3 minutes until venting. "Move now. Questions later." They crawled as quickly as Bite's injury would allow. Navigating the maze of maintenance shafts by the dim emergency lighting, Razor led the way, her rifle awkwardly positioned in the confined space, but ready nonetheless. With 30 seconds to spare, they reached Junction B12. Razor slapped the emergency override, and the heavy pressure doors slid shut behind them, just as the distant sound of explosive decompression echoed through the ship. They'd survived, barely, but were now in an unknown section of the carrier, with a Valathi kill squad hunting them and ship security likely considering them casualties. "Terminal," Bite gasped, pointing to a maintenance interface embedded in the wall. Razor helped him over to it, and his fingers flew across the keys despite his pain. "Accessing ship systems. Damn, they've locked down most functions after the breach. Let me try the AI directly." The screen flickered, and a stylized human face appeared, the visual representation of the Titan's vengeance's artificial intelligence. "Vanguard." "Unauthorized access detected," the AI stated flatly. "Security protocols engaged." "Override Marine Corps authentication, Sierra Tango 941 Reyes," Razor said quickly. "Emergency situation." The AI paused, processing. "Authentication accepted. Warning, Gunnery Sergeant Mara Reyes is listed as killed in action during security breach. Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated," Razor muttered. "Vanguard, we need information. What is happening on this ship?" "Valathi infiltration team breached hull integrity at 0347 hours. Current assessment, 12 to 15 hostiles, using advanced cloaking technology. Ship security responding, but hostiles are evading detection. Captain has ordered jump to Terran space in 30 minutes. Razor exchanged glances with Lee. "They're not just here for a smash and grab. They want something specific." "What's in this data core?" Bite asked, holding up the cylinder. Vanguard's digital face frowned. "That object matches description of experimental data storage device from Laboratory 42, contents classified level Alpha, project designation Prometheus." "That's helpful," Razor said sarcastically. "What's Project Prometheus?" "Information restricted to command level clearance." Bite's fingers danced across the keyboard again. "Let me try something." His face suddenly paled even further. "Oh, hell." "What?" Razor demanded. "I didn't decrypt the core, but I got the project summary. Prometheus is a reverse-engineered Valathi bioweapon. The scientists were trying to create a targeted pathogen that would only affect Valathi physiology." Lee looked horrified. "That's a direct violation of the Arcturus Convention. Biowarfare was outlawed after the Procyon massacre." "Which explains why the Valathi sent in their best to retrieve it," Razor concluded grimly. "If word got out that humanity was developing bioweapons against them, it would justify full-scale war," Bite finished. "No more border skirmishes or proxy conflicts. They'd hit every human world with everything they have." The implications were staggering. The tenuous peace between the Human Federation and the Valathi Empire had been maintained through a careful balance of deterrence and diplomatic maneuvering. if either side could claim legitimate cause for total war. Vanguard, Razor addressed the AI again. Does Captain Reeves know what was in Lab 42? Negative. Laboratory 42 operates under Science Division authority with special compartmentalized security protocols. Captain Reeves is aware of the breach, but not the nature of the compromised research. A plan began to form in Razor's mind. So the ship is jumping to Terran space in less than 30 minutes, with a Valathi kill squad aboard and evidence of illegal human bioweapons research, and Ship Command thinks we're dead. That about sums it up, Bite agreed weakly. What's your play, Sarge? Lee asked, already knowing from her expression that she had one. Razor checked her rifle again, determination hardening her features. We need to get this data core to Captain Reeves before the jump. It's evidence of a war crime by our own people, but it's also the only proof of what really happened here. And the Valathi? Lee asked. A cold smile crossed Razor's face. They came hunting Marines. Time to show them what that really means. You've got a 0.02% chance of pulling this off. Sergeant, Vanguard's emotionless voice interjected. It's like betting on a snail in a chariot race. Never tell me the odds. Vanguard, Razor replied, checking her combat harness. I need a route to the bridge that avoids main corridors. And I need medical supplies, Lee added. Bite won't make it far in his condition. The AI displayed a ship schematic on the terminal. Maintenance shaft 22B will take you within one section of the medical bay. Bridge access can be achieved through auxiliary tube C7, but it requires crossing the main engineering deck. Where are the Valathi concentrating their efforts? Razor asked. Unknown. Cloaking technology is interfering with internal sensors. Last confirmed sighting was in science section, approaching laboratory storage. Razor nodded. Thereafter, any remaining research data. Bite. I need you to create a diversion, something to keep ship security focused away from our path. Despite his pain, the tech specialist grinned. I've got just the thing. Vanguard. Give me access to environmental controls for decks 3 through 5. The AI hesitated. That exceeds your authorization level. Override emergency tactical necessity, Razor snapped. Do it. Acknowledged. Access granted. Bite's fingers flew across the terminal, initiating randomized atmosphere pressure fluctuations and emergency lighting sequences. It'll look like the Valathi are trying to breach those decks. Should keep security busy for at least 15 minutes. Good enough, Razor said. Lee, get him to medical, patch him up, and secure that data core. I'll create another diversion near engineering. Lee frowned. You're going alone against a Valathi kill squad? They're hunting a squad, Razor replied, checking her combat knife, the razor-sharp blade that had earned her call sign years ago. But they're going to find one very pissed-off Marine instead. As Razor crawled through the cramped ventilation shafts of the Titan's Vengeance, sweat beading on her forehead, her mind drifted to New Harmony. The screams of colonists, the smell of burning homes, the chittering sounds of Valathi warriors as they methodically exterminated human presence on the planet. She remembered hiding in a drainage culvert, watching through a grate as her brother Mateo was impaled on a Valathi blade. His expression one of confusion rather than fear. He'd been too young to understand what was happening. She pushed the memory away. Now wasn't the time for ghosts. The maintenance shaft narrowed, forcing her to wriggle forward on her elbows. Her wounded side protested, but she ignored the pain. According to Vanguard's directions, she was approaching a junction that would give her access to the secondary engineering control room, a position from which she could create the mother of all distractions. As she neared the access panel, she heard voices, human voices. Pausing, she pressed her ear against the thin metal wall. Told you. I don't know anything about Lab 42's research. I'm just a maintenance tech. And I'm telling you, if you don't open that secure storage locker, these aliens are going to do a lot worse than I ever could." Razor frowned. That didn't sound like a hostage situation. It sounded like collaboration. Carefully, she removed the access panel and peered through. Two figures stood in the control room, a man in engineering coveralls and another in the distinctive black uniform of ship security. The security officer had a sidearm pointed at the engineer, who was frantically working on a sealed compartment set into the wall. "The Valathi are paying me enough to retire to my own private moon," the security officer was saying. "All they want is their tech back. Your precious scientists stole it from a downed Valathi scout ship. Did you really think they wouldn't come looking for it?" Razor had heard enough. Corruption among security forces wasn't unheard of, but actively aiding an enemy boarding party was high treason. She leveled her rifle through the opening and cleared her throat. "Hands where I can see them, Lieutenant," she said coldly, noting the rank insignia on the man's collar. Both men spun around, the security officer bringing up his weapon automatically. Razor's rifle flashed once, and the man's hand exploded in a spray of blood and bone fragments. He screamed, clutching the ruined appendage to his chest. "Next one goes through your head," Razor promised, sliding out of the access panel and dropping to the floor, rifle still trained on him. "Engineer, step away from that locker." The maintenance tech complied immediately, face pale with fear. "He was going to kill me, I swear. I wasn't helping him willingly." "Save it," Razor snapped. "What's in the locker?" "Backup data cores from Lab 42, the engineer stammered. "Emergency duplicates in case the main lab was compromised." Razor's eyes narrowed. More bioweapon research? The security officer, despite his injury, managed a pained laugh. "You don't know anything. Marine, Lab 42 wasn't developing weapons against the Valathi. They were weaponizing Valathi biotech for use against human populations. Black ops stuff. Deniable assets." "Bullshit," Razor spat. "Why would our own people develop weapons against us?" "Because someone's paying them to," the man replied through gritted teeth. "Same reason I'm being paid. The military-industrial complex needs its next big war to justify budget increases. What better way than a Valathi unprovoked attack after discovering human bioweapons research?" Razor's mind raced. If what he was saying was true, then both she and the Valathi were being played, pawns in some larger game she didn't understand. "The data core my squad recovered," she began. "A plant," the security officer confirmed. "Designed to be found. The real research is in these backup cores. The Valathi came for their stolen tech, but someone made sure they'd find evidence of biowarfare research too. It was elaborate, convoluted, and exactly the kind of thing that the shadowy intelligence agencies of the Human Federation might concoct. Razor had seen enough political maneuvering during her 15 years of service to know that the truth was often buried beneath layers of deception. "Who's behind it?" she demanded. The man's expression became guarded. "I just follow the money, but my contact has ties to Hegemony Holdings." Razor recognized the name, one of the largest military contractors in human space, with fingers in everything from weapons manufacturing to colony development. If they were engineering a conflict with the Valathi. Her deliberation was cut short by the sound of chittering from the corridor outside. The Valathi had found them. Making a split-second decision, Razor slammed the butt of her rifle into the security officer's temple, knocking him unconscious. "To the engineer," she said. "Get in the maintenance shaft, now." As the man scrambled to comply, Razor turned to the locker. The security officer had been ready to kill for what was inside, which meant it was valuable to someone. She couldn't leave it for the Valathi, but she also couldn't trust that taking it to ship's command would result in justice being served. The chittering grew louder. No time to deliberate further. Razor slapped a breaching charge from her combat harness onto the locker. 3 seconds later, the small explosion blew the door off its hinges, revealing 3 data cores similar to the one Byte had recovered. She grabbed them, stuffed them into a pouch, and turned to the room's main console. Her fingers flew across the interface, accessing the engineering subsystems. If she was going to create a diversion, it might as well be spectacular. "Vanguard," she muttered. "If you're monitoring, I need a localized overload in the plasma conduits for Section 18C, non-lethal but very, very bright." There was no response from the AI, but the console acknowledged her commands. Warning lights began to flash as she programmed the overload sequence. Just as the door to the control room began to slide open, revealing the armored form of a Valathi warrior, Razor dived into the maintenance shaft and pulled the access panel closed behind her. The corridor behind her lit up with blinding blue-white light as the plasma conduits released their energy in a controlled but impressive burst. The Valathi's screeching suggested they'd been caught directly in the flare, their compound eyes particularly sensitive to that specific wavelength of light. "Move!" she hissed to the engineer, who was frozen in terror a few meters into the shaft. "Medical bay. Now!" They crawled as quickly as possible through the narrow confines, the sounds of enraged Valathi fading behind them. Razor's mind was working overtime, processing this new information. If what the security officer had said was true, then the data core Byte had was planted evidence. While these new cores contained the real story, one that implicated human interests in engineering a war, the implications were staggering. And with less than 20 minutes until the ship jumped to Terran space, she had precious little time to act. The medical bay was in chaos when Razor and the engineer finally arrived. Wounded crew members filled every available bed, the victims of the Valathi incursion receiving emergency treatment from overworked medical staff. In the far corner, Razor spotted Lee working on Byte, who lay on a makeshift pallet on the floor. She made her way over, keeping her head down to avoid being recognized. As far as ship's command knew, Gunnery Sergeant Mara Reyes was dead, and she wanted to keep that assumption intact for as long as possible. "Status?" she asked quietly, kneeling beside Lee. The medic looked up, relief washing over his face. "Stabilized. Nanomeds are knitting the bone, but he'll need real surgery once we reach Terran space." He nodded to the engineer hovering nervously behind her. "Who's your friend?" "Witness," Razor replied curtly. "What's happening ship-wide?" Byte, though pale and drawn, was conscious. "The captain's locked down all sections and is preparing for emergency jump. Security is still tracking Valathi movements, but they're ghosts with those cloaking devices." "What about the data core?" Byte patted a secure medical container beside him. "Safe, but I've been thinking, Sarge, something doesn't add up. The core's encryption is too basic for something supposedly containing classified bioweapons research. It's almost like it was meant to be found," Razor finished, pulling out the 3 additional cores she'd recovered. "Because it was, the real data is here." Lee's eyes widened. "Where did you get those?" Razor quickly explained what she'd learned from the security officer. When she finished, both Lee and Byte wore expressions of disbelief. "Hegemony Holdings engineering a war," Byte whispered. "That's next-level conspiracy theory stuff. Sarge." "Is it?" Razor countered. "Think about it. Who benefits most from an all-out human Valathi war? The defense contractors, the military-industrial complex, and with public outrage over Valathi theft of bioweapons research, no one would question the massive military buildup that would follow." Lee shook his head. "But sacrificing an entire ship? Hundreds of crew members? That's cold even for corporate warmongers." "Acceptable losses," the engineer interjected quietly. "That's what my supervisor called the potential casualties when they installed the new security protocols for Lab 42 last month. I thought it was just administrator talk, But now, the medbay doors slid open, and a squad of security officers entered. Weapons drawn, they began methodically checking the identification of everyone present. "They're looking for us," Byte murmured, "or the data cores." Razor quickly shoved the 3 new cores into the medical container with the original. "Lee, you and Byte stay here. If they find you, you know nothing about any conspiracy. You found a data core during the attack, and you're turning it in to the proper authorities." "What about you?" Lee asked, concern etching his features. "I'm going to the engine room," Razor replied, determination hardening her voice. "The Valathi need to know they're being played, same as us. If I can find their commander—" "That's suicide," Byte protested. "Even if you could communicate with them, why would they believe you?" Razor's hand went to the pouch containing the data cores. "Because I'll have proof, and because right now, stopping this ship from jumping to Terran space with false evidence of Valathi aggression is the only way to prevent a war that would kill billions." Lee looked like he wanted to argue further, but the security team was getting closer. "Go," he said finally. "We'll create a distraction if needed." With a nod of thanks, Razor slipped away, using the crowded conditions of the medbay to mask her movement toward a service exit. The engineer followed close behind, clearly unwilling to face questioning from security. As they entered another maintenance corridor, Razor turned to him. "What's your name?" "Patel. Kumar Patel," he replied nervously. "Look, I just fix things. I don't want to be involved in whatever this is." "Too late," Razor told him grimly. "You know too much, and that security officer saw you. If whoever's behind this realizes you might talk—" She let the implication hang in the air. Patel swallowed hard. "What do you need me to do?" "Get me to the main engine room without being spotted. I need to find the Valathi commander before this ship jumps." The engineer nodded, his expression resolving into determination. "This way. There's a maintenance elevator that bypasses the security checkpoints." As they moved through the bowels of the massive ship, Razor's thoughts turned to gears. He'd sacrificed himself to give them a chance, not knowing that the mission itself might be built on lies. How many other good Marines had died over the years for similar deceptions? The maintenance elevator was little more than a platform with a control panel, used by engineering crews to access the massive engine assemblies that powered the Titan's vengeance. As it descended toward the heart of the ship, the temperature rose noticeably, and the ever-present hum of the fusion reactors grew louder. "The main coolant control station is there," Patel said, pointing to a raised platform overlooking a vast chamber filled with pulsing energy conduits and massive machinery. "It gives the best view of the entire engine room. If the Valathi commander is anywhere, it would be there, tactical high ground." Razor nodded. "Get back to a safe location. If I don't stop this jump, find a way to contact Terran Central Command directly. Tell them everything." Patel looked doubtful but gave a shaky salute before disappearing back into the elevator. Alone now, Razor surveyed the engine room. The space was enormous, cathedral-like in its dimensions, with walkways crisscrossing above the massive fusion reactors that powered the ship. Steam hissed from pressure valves, creating an ethereal atmosphere as it caught the blue light from the reactor cores. And there, on the coolant control platform, just as Patel had predicted, was movement. Even with their cloaking technology, the Valathi couldn't completely hide the slight distortion in the air that betrayed their presence. Razor took a deep breath, checked her rifle's charge one last time, and began making her way toward the platform. She moved from shadow to shadow, using the ambient noise of the engine room to mask her footsteps. Years of combat experience guided her movements, deliberate, patient, precise. As she neared the platform, she could make out more details. 3 Valathi warriors stood guard while a 4th, larger figure examined the coolant control systems. This had to be their commander, the distinctive decorative scarification on its carapace marking its elite status. Razor had two choices: go in shooting and almost certainly die, or try something monumentally stupid. In the spirit of Marine Corps tradition, she opted for the latter. She stepped out into the open, rifle lowered but ready. "Commander Talek Voro," she called out, using the name she'd heard whispered in intelligence briefings about the Velathi's most deadly kill squad leader. The effect was immediate. All four Velathi decloaked, their natural camouflage ability dropping as they switched to combat stance. The largest one, nearly 8 feet tall with scarred chitin plates that spoke of countless battles, turned slowly to face her. "Human," it said, its voice a discordant series of clicks and whistles, translated through some kind of vocoder. "You know my name. You will die with that honor." "Before you kill me," Razor replied, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, "you should know you're being manipulated. We both are." The Velathi commander made a sound that might have been laughter. Is this the famous human desperation before death? Amusing, but futile. "The bioweapon research you came to recover." Razor pressed on, slowly reaching for the medical container holding the data cores. "It was planted, designed to be found by your kill squad." This gave Talek Voro pause. "Explain, human, quickly." "The real research isn't about weapons against Velathi," she said, carefully opening the container to reveal the 4 data cores. "It's about weaponizing stolen Velathi biotech for use against human populations. Someone wants our species at war, and they're using both of us to light the fuse." The commander chittered something to his warriors in their native language, and they spread out, surrounding Razor but not attacking yet. "These accusations require proof," Talek Voro said finally. "That's why I'm here," Razor replied, holding up one of the data cores. "These contain the real research data, not the planted evidence your team was meant to find." The Velathi commander approached, its towering form making Razor feel small despite her own considerable height. Multifaceted eyes studied her with alien intensity. "And you, a human warrior, would betray your own kind?" The doubt in its translated voice was clear. "I'm not betraying humanity," Razor said firmly. "I'm trying to save it, same as you're trying to save your people. Billions would die in an all-out war between our species." Talek Voro reached out with one clawed appendage, taking the data core from her hand. From a compartment in its armor, it produced a device that interfaced with the core. Alien text scrolled across a small screen as it analyzed the contents. "This contains partial signatures of Velathi biotech," it acknowledged after a moment, "stolen from the scout ship Karithvex." "That's what you really came for," Razor confirmed. "But someone made sure you'd find evidence of human bioweapons too, the perfect pretext for war." The ship's announcement system suddenly activated. "Attention all personnel. Jump sequence initiating in 5 minutes. Secure all stations and prepare for dimensional transition." Talek Voro's head tilted, a gesture Razor had learned indicated deep thought among the Velathi. "If what you say is true, human, this ship must not reach Terran space with the false evidence." "Exactly," Razor agreed. "But we can't simply destroy it. The truth needs to reach both our governments." The Velathi commander studied her for another long moment, then made a decision. "My shuttle remains docked in your auxiliary bay. It has communication capabilities that can reach both the Velathi High Command and your Terran authorities." It was more cooperation than Razor had dared hope for, but a new problem presented itself. The shuttle bay is 6 decks up, and security will have locked down all major transit routes by now. "We have ways," Talek Voro assured her, triggering something on its armor. A holographic display appeared, showing a ship schematic similar to what Vanguard had shown her, but with additional pathways highlighted. Velathi infiltration tactics include mapping alternative routes through enemy vessels. Razor couldn't help but be impressed. Smart. We are not mindless killers, human, despite what your propaganda suggests, the commander replied, a hint of what might have been wry humor in its translated voice. The moment of understanding was shattered by the sound of the engine room's main doors sliding open. Security teams poured in, weapons raised. "Multiple hostile contacts," their leader shouted into his comm. "And wait, is that Sergeant Reyes? She's collaborating with the enemy." Razor cursed under her breath. So much for the subtle approach. Talek Voro made a gesture, and his warriors activated their cloaking devices, disappearing from human sight. The commander itself remained visible, moving to stand beside Razor. "An alliance of necessity. Human," it said, unsheathing wicked-looking blades from its forearm guards. "To save both our peoples." Razor raised her rifle as the security teams opened fire. "Never thought I'd fight alongside a Velathi. And I never thought a human would show true honor," Talek Voro replied before launching itself toward the security teams with frightening speed. The battle that followed was chaos. Razor provided covering fire while the cloaked Velathi warriors wreaked havoc among the security teams. Talek Voro moved like a force of nature, its blades flashing in the blue light of the engine room as it cut through the human soldiers with surgical precision. Under different circumstances, Razor would have been appalled by the sight of fellow humans falling to alien blades. But these weren't fellow Marines. They were corrupt security forces working to trigger a war that would kill billions. Still, she aimed for non-lethal shots where possible, disabling rather than killing. "We must reach the upper decks," Talek Voro called to her as they fought their way toward the secondary access shaft. 3 minutes until jump." Razor's rifle whined as it approached overheating. She'd been firing almost continuously, keeping the security teams pinned down while the Velathi warriors flanked them. "Working on it." A security officer managed to get close, swinging the butt of his rifle at her head. Razor ducked, drawing her combat knife in one fluid motion and slashing across the man's thigh. He fell with a cry of pain. "This way," she shouted to Talek Voro, spotting an opening in the security cordon. Together, they sprinted for the access shaft, the Velathi commander covering their retreat with surprising precision. They reached the shaft and began to climb, the sounds of battle fading below them. Razor's wounded side screamed in protest, but she gritted her teeth and pushed through the pain. 2 minutes until jump. "Your shuttle," she gasped as they climbed. "Can it break dock automatically if we're not there in time?" "Yes," Talek Voro confirmed, its multiple limbs making the climb look effortless. "But the data cores must be aboard for transmission." Razor nodded grimly. They would make it, or they would die trying. There was no middle ground now. They emerged from the shaft into a corridor near the auxiliary docking bay. Alarms blared and red warning lights flashed. The ship was on full alert, with less than a minute until jump. "There!" Talek Voro pointed to a sleek, predatory-looking vessel docked at the far end of the bay. Unlike the bulky human ships, the Velathi shuttle was all angles and chitinous protrusions, resembling its creators in its alien aesthetics. They ran for it, hearing the pounding of boots as more security forces converged on their position. The shuttle's entry ramp lowered as they approached, responding to some silent command from its commander. 30 seconds. Razor was halfway up the ramp when a plasma bolt struck her in the back, her armor absorbing most of the impact, but the force still sending her sprawling. The medical container with the data cores flew from her grip, skidding across the shuttle's deck. She turned to see Lieutenant Commander Reeves himself, the ship's second in command, standing at the bay entrance with a high-powered plasma rifle. "Traitor!" he shouted, taking aim for another shot. Talek Voro moved faster than Razor thought possible, interposing itself between her and the officer. The plasma bolt meant for her head struck the Velothi commander in the chest, burning through its natural armor. Despite the grievous wound, Talek Voro hurled one of its blades with perfect accuracy. The weapon embedded itself in Reeves's throat, and he collapsed, the rifle clattering to the deck. "Go!" Razor shouted to the wounded commander, grabbing the container and shoving it into its hands. "Complete the mission." The ship's AI announced, "Jump sequence in 10, 9. Talek Voro grasped her arm with surprising gentleness. "You have shown the courage of a true warrior, Mara Reyes. Your name will be remembered in the Velothi Chronicles." "Just make sure the truth gets out," she replied, pushing him the rest of the way up the ramp. "Save our people." 8, 7. The Velothi commander hesitated, then nodded once, a very human gesture of respect. The shuttle's ramp began to close as Talek Voro retreated inside. 6, 5. Razor turned to face the security forces now flooding into the bay, her rifle raised. She wouldn't go down without a fight. 4, 3. The shuttle's engines flared to life, the docking clamps releasing as it prepared for emergency departure. 2. A familiar voice called her name. Razor turned to see Lee and Bite, supported by Patel, emerge from a side entrance to the bay. 1. The world seemed to slow, the shuttle breaking free of the dock, her squad mates reaching for her, the security teams raising their weapons, and beneath it all, the building energy of the dimensional drive preparing to tear a hole in space-time. Jump initiated. The universe twisted, and everything went white. The first thing Razor felt was pain, an encouraging sign that she wasn't dead. The second was the cool metal deck beneath her cheek, vibrating slightly with the hum of engines. She opened her eyes to see the familiar ceiling of a medical bay, though not the one from the Titan's vengeance. This one was smaller, more utilitarian, with the distinctive blue lighting used on Terran military vessels. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Sarge," a familiar voice said. Razor turned her head to see Bite sitting in a chair beside her bed, his leg encased in a regeneration sleeve but otherwise looking much improved. "What happened? Where are we?" "Terran Navy frigate Indomitable," he replied with a grin. "They picked up the Velothi shuttle's transmission and intercepted us just after the jump. Been in FTL heading back to Earth for the past 3 days. "Us?" Razor tried to sit up, wincing as her various injuries protested. "Easy there, hero." Lee's voice came from her other side. The medic gently pushed her back down. "Doctor's orders. You've got 3 cracked ribs, plasma burns on 20% of your back, and enough stress chemicals in your system to kill a small horse." Razor relaxed back onto the bed, processing this information. "The Velothi shuttle made it through the jump, Talek Voro?" Lee's expression turned somber. "The commander didn't make it. Internal injuries from that plasma shot were too severe, but he lived long enough to transmit the data to both human and Velothi authorities, along with a personal commendation of your actions." The news hit Razor harder than she expected. Despite their species' bloody history, she'd come to respect the Velothi commander in their brief alliance, and the conspiracy, Hegemony Holdings. Bite's face lit up with vindication. "That's the best part. While you were playing hero in the shuttle bay, Patel got me access to a secure comms terminal. I managed to send everything we knew to some journalist contacts before the jump. It hit the news feeds about 6 hours later, and all hell broke loose." "The stock market tanked," Lee added with grim satisfaction. "Hegemony's shares are worthless, and the CEO and half the board have been arrested. The science division's undergoing a complete purge, and there's talk of a joint human Velothi commission to investigate the theft of their biotech." Razor let out a long breath. Against all odds, they'd succeeded, not just in surviving, but in preventing what could have been the most devastating war in human history. "Gears?" she asked quietly, already knowing the answer. Lee shook his head. His body was recovered after the Titan's vengeance returned to Earth. Full military honors. The president herself attended the ceremony. Razor closed her eyes for a moment, honoring her fallen comrade's sacrifice. When she opened them again, she found both Bite and Lee watching her with concern. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," came a new voice from the doorway. "You recover, Gunnery Sergeant, and then we have work to do." Razor looked up to see a tall woman in the formal dress uniform of the Terran Marine Corps, the stars of a general gleaming on her shoulders. "General Harrison," Lee murmured, he and Bite snapping to attention despite their injuries. "At ease," the general said, approaching Razor's bedside. "I've been reading the reports from the Titan's vengeance incident. Quite a story. Corruption, conspiracy, and a Marine who risked everything to prevent an unjust war." Razor met the general's gaze steadily. "Just doing my job, ma'am." Harrison's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Your job was to patrol a corridor. Sergeant, what you did goes far beyond duty." She glanced at Bite and Lee. "What all of you did." "What happens with the Valathi now?" Razor asked. "Their commander died trying to save both our species." "That's why I'm here," Harrison replied, her expression turning serious. "The Valathi High Command has proposed a joint task force, humans and Valathi working together to root out the remaining conspirators and prevent similar manipulations in the future. They specifically requested you and your squad to represent humanity's interests." Razor exchanged glances with Bite and Lee, seeing her own surprise mirrored in their faces. "Why us?" she asked finally. "Because," Harrison said, "according to the final transmission from Commander Talek Voro, you proved that humans can show the same honor and courage that the Valathi value above all else." In his words, they sent their elite kill squad to hunt one human Marine. It was the biggest mistake of their lives, but also perhaps the most fortunate one for both our peoples. Razor felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Gears hadn't died for nothing. None of this had been for nothing. "When do we start?" she asked. Harrison smiled. "As soon as you can stand, Gunny. The universe is waiting." Later, as Lee and Bite discussed the details of their new assignment with General Harrison, Razor gazed out the viewport at the streaking stars of FTL travel. Somewhere out there, both human and Valathi worlds continued to exist because one squad of Marines and one alien commander had chosen truth over blind loyalty. She thought of New Harmony, of her family, of all the years she'd carried her hatred for the Valathi like a blade against her own heart. Perhaps now she could finally set it down. "Next time they underestimate one Marine," she murmured to herself, a slight smile touching her lips. "Bet on the snail." In the vast darkness of space, the frigate Indomitable continued its journey home, carrying with it the seeds of an unprecedented alliance between former enemies and the survivors who had made it possible.